All right, we're going to get started. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Laura Zabo-Kubitz, and I'm one of the co-leads of the California Alliance for Student Parent Success, also known as the Alliance. California's three public higher education segments have been making strides to support parenting students, and the Alliance has been working closely with them to advance these efforts. Following our February 4th webinar with the California Community Colleges and our June 10th webinar with the University of California, we're continuing the conversation today to spotlight progress across the California State University. Please note that today's session is being recorded, and do feel free to share any questions you have through the Q&A feature. Next slide, please. During today's webinar, we will share how the CSU is rolling out its new Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative and supporting implementation of the Gains for Student Parents Act. You'll learn about the efforts of the Alliance, including resources developed to support Gains Act implementation, and hear directly from student parents and advocates about how to support student-parent college affordability and success. At the conclusion of the panel, there should also be time for additional audience Q&A. We are honored to be joined today by the following panelists: Chelsea Crabtree, graduate student parent, and Dr. Tina Chook, Associate Professor of Elementary Science Education, both at California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo; Dr. Queena Hong, Senior Program Manager, Student Basic Needs at Michelson 20mm Foundation; Emily Cass, System-Wide Manager of Basic Needs Initiatives, CSU Office of the Chancellor; and Dr. Larissa Mercado Lopez, Professor and Chair of the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies Department at California State University, Fresno. We are going to turn first to Emily, who will share about how the CSU is supporting student parents, including through its new Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative.
Thanks so much, Laura. Great to be here. As Laura mentioned, my name is Emily Cass. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the System-Wide Manager of Basic Needs Initiatives with the CSU Office of the Chancellor. I'm going to talk a little bit about what our new Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative looks like here in the CSU Chancellor's Office for the California State University system. It has quite the extensive history, and there's been a transition from the Michelson 20mm Foundation. Incredible transformative momentum that was built by the Michelson 20mm Foundation over the past several years, including the California State University Student Parent Network, which is comprised of Tina and Larissa, who are on this call, as well as Haley Myers Dillon, and a couple other folks that are pictured here. And those folks started an incredible initiative within the Michelson 20mm Foundation to include student parents within the conversation and to include folks who are participating in or who are leading these sort of initiatives on their campuses, including advocacy around AB 2881, which is the Priority Registration for Student Parents bill, and that has prompted significant momentum within the California State University system to collect data on who our student parents are, how many we have within the system, and what sort of support is being provided for those students has been able to follow that. The California Student Parent Pooled Fund, which the California State University Chancellor's Office is a recipient of for our Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative. And we will be using those funds to expand our Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative, which I'll talk about shortly. There's also a transformative State of Pregnant and Parenting Students in California series, both online and in person, that was hosted by the Michelson 20mm Foundation. You'll see here on the right side of the slide is a snapshot of the Michelson 20mm Foundation website that shares a little bit more about what their work has been over the past several years. we were approached by Michelson 20mm Foundation here in our student wellness and basic needs team at the chancellor's office to expand this initiative, or to essentially to transition the initiative to the chancellor's office to institutionalize the sport across the CSU, and to ensure that we were continuing that incredible momentum that was created by the foundation. Next slide, please. This is the structure of our new system-wide Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative Task Force. This is a sneak peek as we will be officially launching the task force, including the stakeholder group and the task force committees this summer at our CSU Basic Needs virtual convening in July. This is a snapshot of what this is going to look like and the folks that we are hoping to bring into the fold. And I will be including a link in the chat for folks who are interested in participating in either the stakeholder group or as a member of any of the committees. We'll be focusing on data collection and data tracking of students within the CSU so that we can better understand who our student parent population is, so that we can better support them, and then programs implementation across the system, as well as policy and advocacy, knowing that there are several there's legislation around student parent support that we want to ensure that we have advocacy and support for on all levels of the CSU community, including those who are administrators, those who are staff, those who are faculty, those who are students and student parents. Everyone's voice is important in this initiative, and the pillars are listed there as well. Next slide, please. This is a quick look at what we will be looking at within the Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative and focusing on within the initiative. Our goal is to holistically serve student parents and support their families' well-being on the path to graduation. Currently, and the first part of the slide mentions what the task force will be comprised of, and one of the primary goals of the task force will be to create a toolkit, or to take all of the existing resources that we have available and create more materials so that we have, including those that are available for the Gaines Act implementation, so that we have a comprehensive and effective and widely used toolkit so that across the system we can see student parent support equitably provided for students across the CSU. So that is to come from the task force itself. Then we do have some quite impactful existing resources within the system, which the CSU Student Parent Network was working on, from the Michelson 20mm Foundation, and has been working on for years, as well as several other folks throughout the system. Shout out to our basic needs teams throughout the CSU system and other folks that are in some ways associated with or working alongside the basic needs teams to support our student parents in the CSU. The priority class registration came from AB 2881, as formerly mentioned. We also have several of our campuses throughout the system that are offering parenting supplies in the pantry. So we have formula and diaper distribution programs and wipes and toys and all sort of resources for our student parents that are available widely. We're hoping to expand this form of resource distribution across the system with the implementation of the task force. And we also have seen some incredible student engagement, student parent engagement across the system, including community groups on several of our campuses, specifically for student parents that are focused on cultivating that sense of belonging for our students and that connection to their campuses. So this is just a quick look at what this looks like, at what this has looked like and will continue to look like as we expand the initiative. Next slide, please. Here we have some examples of some of the awesome press that we've had around the launch of the Pregnant Parenting Students Initiative. Our hope is to grow this to the point of everyone associates the California State University system with comprehensive and equitable and sustainable student parent support that meets the needs of student parents and ensures that that student parent voice is not just heard, but that their ideas and their needs are wholly implemented, support for their needs are wholly implemented across the system. So all of this, and on the right, you'll see a student parent and her child at Fresno State, and you'll hear a little bit more from Larissa on what that's looked like. But we've seen some incredible initiatives across the system thus far, and we're really looking forward to expanding that in the years to come with this initiative.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily, for all the incredibly helpful information and the great work that you're doing to support pregnant and parenting students at CSU. Next, we're going to share about the efforts of the California Alliance for Student Parent Success and implementation of the GAINS Act in particular. Next slide, please. For those of you who may be new to our work, the Alliance is administered by California Competes, Higher Education for a Strong Economy, and EdTrust West. Our organizations have joined forces to leverage each of its unique strengths and expertise to drive meaningful change that bridges equity gaps and strengthens systems that will enable current and future generations to truly thrive. Before we dive in, we'd like to thank our current funders, ECMC Foundation and Imaginable Futures, who have continuously supported the Alliance's efforts and make this work possible. I'm sorry, I've got one other thing on the other slide. Through research, policy, advocacy, capacity building, and community engagement, the Alliance supports the post-secondary success and comprehensive well-being of California student parents and their families. By driving collective action among a diverse group of stakeholders, we envision a California where higher education systems equitably support and empower student parents on their paths to earning meaningful credentials and securing gainful employment. Next slide, please. Crucial to our efforts is the Alliance's advisory committee, which includes student parents and professionals across multiple sectors, including research, law, direct service, and early childhood education. Our dedicated committee provides guidance and expertise to help inform our strategies for advancing student parent success. The Alliance engages in 4 anchoring activities to advance our mission, which are policy advocacy to propel systems change to better serve student parents and their families, research and analysis to fill in the informational gaps to advance smart policies that make the most impact, capacity building to improve institutional practices and structures to address student parents' needs, and community engagement to connect and empower all those dedicated to student parent success. Most importantly, we strive to empower student parents with tools and relationships to ensure their experiences and perspectives shape state policies. The Alliance's work is rooted in 5 core priorities: strengthening financial aid to cover student parents' true college costs, providing quality, affordable childcare options to address student parents' needs, meeting the housing needs of student parents and their families, advancing family-serving institutional policies and practices, and improving data collection and utilization on student parents' pathways to improve their well-being and success. Additionally, we have created a research agenda to dig deeper into our key priorities, and so far have produced 2 publications that shed light on student parents in California. The California Student Parents Almanac and its accompanying infographic leverages federal data to offer an in-depth analysis of the identities and educational experiences of California student parents, including how they pay for college. For example, nearly half, or 46%, of student parents receive a Pell Grant, the key federal need-based financial aid program for undergrads and a proxy for low-income status, compared to 37% of non-parenting students. And making the invisible visible focuses on elevating the voices and experiences of individuals who are directly involved in supporting parenting students across 11 CSU campuses and highlights successful practices at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and Sacramento State. AB 2458, the Gains for Student Parents Act, is the Alliance's first sponsored bill, and we are thrilled that Governor Newsom signed it into law this past September. It allows colleges to comprehensively identify student parents, capture their true costs, and increase their access to financial aid. We are on the road to its implementation, which began in January and will continue to roll out over the next year. We're here to celebrate and raise awareness about the bill and dig deeper into the resources created to support its implementation. So, what exactly is the GAINS Act and how does it support student parents? It raises the visibility of student parents on campus and enhances their financial aid awareness and access by sharing comprehensive information about available resources and supports on required student parent web pages, as well as developing and disseminating segmental cost of attendance adjustment policies for campuses to implement, updating campus net price calculators to include baseline student parent college costs, and robust data tracking of student parents across the CSU system. To support implementation of the Gains for Student Parents Act, the Alliance is creating resources for colleges and advocates, and we encourage you to share them with your campus registrar, student services, faculty and staff, and students. We have released a Gains Act fact sheet, which describes all of the new law's provisions, as well as a web page toolkit and sample campus student parent web page to support campuses as they update key on and off campus resources and services. We are also compiling a roster of campus information and web pages, as well as other available resources, including California Compete's Public Benefits Finder and a template dependent care allowance request letter that colleges can make available for student parents. All of this information is available at the QR link on the slide, and please do let us know if you have any feedback on these resources or would like to request an additional resource be developed. And please also make sure you see the CSU Student Wellbeing and Basic Needs webpage for information, which will be updated soon with more detail about the Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative. As noted, we have created a toolkit for web support staff who manage college student parent web pages. There is also a sample social media post colleges can customize to share student parent website with student parents on campus and spread the word. We have drafted a sample email to faculty as well so that they can be reminded to add this link to their syllabi each semester as required. Also, over the course of this year, the segments have been putting together their guidance to campuses so that each can implement streamlined cost of attendance updates to ensure student parents receive support with their true college costs. Please help your campus by reviewing its cost of attendance page and adjustment process and reaching out to student parents to help them complete dependent care allowance forms each term. As campuses update their cost of attendance for student parents, here is some other key information to note. Recent federal legislation through FAFSA simplification modified some cost of attendance components. Changes include requiring a separate student budget for students in institutionally owned housing for students with and without dependents, and a non zero amount for living expenses for students living at home with families. Importantly, the FSA, Federal Student Aid Handbook, shares that for students with dependents, the dependent care allowance covers actual costs expected to be incurred for dependent care during periods that include, but are not limited to, class time, study time, fieldwork, internships, and commuting time for the student. Because students are often unaware of this allowance, the handbook instructs schools to explain the availability of this allowance when counseling students and to tell them how to request a dependent care allowance be included in their cost of attendance. To support segments in creating guidance for campuses, we've highlighted data sources that can be drawn on to inform parenting students' costs. In addition, of course, to on campus meal plans, housing, and child care centers, these include USDA food plans, Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, specifically for California, the HUD fair market rents, and county-specific CDSS childcare reimbursement rates, as well as information provided in students' cost of attendance budget appeals forms. While there are many resources on campus that can help student parent success, student parents often do not know they exist or how to get in touch. The Alliance has put together an information inventory linking to each CSU as well as UC and community college student parent webpage, financial aid office, Title IX office, basic needs center, and more. This can help students navigate to the right person and information. It's also an easy way to see if your campus has updated its information based on the most recent laws. It should be the most updated information. However, if there's something is missing that you're aware of, please do reach out to us to let us know so we can continue to update. Before we turn to today's panel, we want to share a few other ways that you can support student parents on your campus, including applying to join the Alliance as a member. There are currently over 60 organizations and individuals who are a part of our community, which is free to join. You can do so through the QR link on this slide, which we will also share over email after this webinar. We also hope that you will join us in September for our biannual California Student Parent Summit, this time held at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Early bird registration is now until July 11th. And in recognition of budget constraints many of us are facing this year, we've created a justification toolkit to help you secure funding to attend. We will have on-site childcare, meals will be provided, and both undergraduate and graduate students may register for free. We really hope that you're able to join us in September. And we're also excited to announce the expansion of the Alliance's community of practice to include all 3 public higher ed segments, UCs, CSUs, and the community colleges, a tri-segmental effort. This effort will support 6 public colleges and universities, 2 per segment, in strengthening campus resources and services for single mothers and other parenting students. Each participating college will receive in-kind technical assistance and stipends, opportunities to collaborate with peer institutions across segments, support to develop a data-driven tailored action plan, and Gains Act implementation support. A link for more information and to apply is again available in the QR code on this slide, but of course, all of this information will be provided in our follow-up email after the webinar. And now, without further ado, I am honored to turn it over to Dr. Quina Hong to introduce and moderate our panel of student parents, faculty, staff, and advocates who will discuss the experience of student parents in higher education, the supports they need, and how robust Gains Act implementation will facilitate their success.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. There's a huge audience. I just want to give a major shout out to the folks that are just so dedicated to being here and to just learning more about the Gains Act, but also just about how to support student parents. And so I'm really happy to be here to help moderate this amazing panel. Without further ado, I will just go ahead and jump in, but I'll also invite our attendees to please use the Q&A function as well as our chat. It's always really encouraging to see folks engaging with our panelists. But if you do drop questions in the Q&A, I will go ahead and um, ask them towards the end. So let's go ahead and get started with folks. If you all panelists, please feel free to introduce yourselves, the role you play at your institution, and then our fun icebreaker question today is, if you are able, please tell us how many student parents are on your campus or campuses. So I'll go ahead and start with Tina.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Tina Chuk. I am Associate Professor at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, and I am the faculty advocate for students with dependents. And on our campus, we have about just under 200. We are a campus of about 22,000. And I will pass it over to Dr. Mercado Lopez.
Hi, everybody. I'm Larissa Mercado Lopez. I'm department chair and professor of women's gender and sexuality studies at Fresno State. And I have been involved in student parent work since about 2016 at Fresno State, and very much inspired by my own experiences as a student parent. And currently, and thank you to Melissa Norris, who answered my question and got the data for me. We have 1,388 students who have self-certified as student parents. We have a population of just over 24,000. So, we're pretty sure that we have a lot more student parents than what is being currently reflected in those numbers.
Emily, go ahead.
And then thanks, Quina. Hi, you heard from me earlier. I can tell you a little bit about myself. So I work in the CSU Chancellor's Office in Basic Needs, System-Wide Manager of Basic Needs Initiatives. I get to work with the incredible basic needs teams across our system on all 23 campuses. And in my role, I write legislative reports to sustain the state funding provided for basic needs. And I convene our basic needs teams in different forms in different capacities, including for our annual convening that happens every summer. And I get to collaborate with awesome orgs like California Competes and the Alliance and EdTrust West and other very student support organizations like the California Higher Education Basic Needs Alliance and the National Coalition for College Student Essential Needs. And I can share a little bit about the number of student parents on the Cal State campuses. So thanks to AB 281 and priority registration, we have unofficial data of students that are self-reporting that they are pregnant and parenting, which doesn't capture the entire population, but is relatively close to what we see in the financial aid dependent data. It was a little over 9,000 students system-wide, and there's a chance the number is higher, especially considering the data we've seen on individual campuses, but we won't know for sure until later on.
Amazing. Thank you, Emily. And Chelsea, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Crabtree. I'm a student parent at Cal Poly, and I'm with Dr. Chuk, and we have under 200 student parents. I also work as the student assistant for the Students with Dependence program on campus.
Amazing. Thank you, Chelsea. And thank you, panelists, for sharing a little bit of that information. But as we mentioned, the GAINS Act is going to be so instrumental in helping campuses, again, better identify the student parents that we have on our campuses, and so that we can better serve them. And so these numbers are just ballparks. And ideally, one day, we'll have better and more accurate data. But I'll go ahead and turn the next question over to Tina. So, Tina, can you tell a little or share a little bit about your experiences working with student parents on your campus at Cal Poly, and then describe some of the barriers that you've seen or witnessed, or you yourself as a student parent witnessed in your time?
Great. I've had the pleasure and privilege to interview a number of student parents across the Cal States, actually, through Student Parent Joy. And what I hear over and over is how highly motivated they are in securing their degrees to enter the workforce so that they can better their lives for themselves and their families. So that's a common theme throughout. I share this because oftentimes we go into a deficit narrative of what student parents need, what supports they are. At the same time, they bring in such rich life and lived experiences in our classroom that prepares all of our students into the workforce so that they can do those things in the practice in the classroom, practice in the hallways, practice in the labs, so that when they get out into the workforce, they are better served for that. That said, they also encounter concrete structural barriers that are systemic. One is college affordability, which cuts across. And I think what makes student parents unique is that they have to take care of their family, right? And so childcare costs, food costs, housing costs. So that's number one. Two other structural issues are childcare and housing. They go hand in hand. And then the last piece I hear over and over is this lack of visibility, right? If you're not seen, if you're not counted, you simply feel erased in the system. So I think in the last 5 to 10 years, as a state, we've moved a lot of progress towards making this population visible through the collection of data, through storytelling. So I think once student parents feel like it's okay to be seen, they see models of it, that it's talked about, it's normalized, then they can feel like themselves. And when you can feel like yourself, then you feel like you belong at the institution, which has longer term outcomes in terms of retention and graduation. So I'll pause there.
I love that. I mean, I feel free, panelists, to also chime in if you all have anything to add to Tina's comments. And I want this to be as much of a conversation. But I agree, right? Like, I think that being seen is so important and being able to systematize some of this stuff. And so the next question kind of goes in for Emily, where I think we do have this opportunity to see Emily's perspective at the systems level, in terms of what the climate has been for student parents and how the system is addressing these barriers, but also highlighting some of those successes that Tina's mentioning, right? Like the narratives of that the joy that the students are bringing. So how is the CSU system doing that?
Yeah, so since I started in my role, it's been a little less than 2 years. I've really seen a significant emphasis placed on understanding the unique competing priorities and challenges of student parents. And Carolyn O'Keefe and I, Carolyn is our assistant system-wide director of student wellness and basic needs. We've been really focused on supporting our campus teams and effectively bolstering student parents' ability to balance their educational goals with the needs of their families. So we partner with practitioners and student parents and faculty and organization partners that have been ingrained in this work for, as mentioned formerly, about the transition from Michelson 20mm Foundation to now having that initiative within our office. We've been working with these folks for student parents, these folks have been working with for student parents for many years, and we've learned so much and have really had that opportunity to reflect and consult with them on what they feel is the most impactful and forward-looking for student parents. We know that great work has been done thus far, and what more can we do? So that's how we transitioned the work to our office. Um, and, the more we learned, the more we felt it really was necessary to institutionalize this work and ensure that CSU student parents were able to be supported progressively better and better for generations to come. And having in these conversations when we were learning, we were seeing folks that had we were engaging in these conversations with folks that had been researching and engaging with student parents for years and seeing the barriers and the supports that worked in the successes of student parents. You mentioned that um, alongside the barriers and to what Tina had mentioned, the really rich contributions that student parents provide to the institutions that they attend, it has been really remarkable to see and to experience and hear about in the last couple of years that I've been in this role and with the task force, including that stakeholder group and committees that I mentioned earlier. We plan to address those barriers that student parents face by learning about them from the source, by having student parents involved in this task force and by collectively working towards solutions. So the task force is going to hopefully amplify how remarkable and invaluable student parents are. And we want to share student parent stories and incorporate their experiences into these system-wide programs. So hopefully the task force will be able to provide the tools to help campuses do just that as well, and work to ensure the student parent perspective on what's best for them is not just heard, but implemented system-wide.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that there just needs to be this opportunity for student parents at the center of all the work that we're doing. And which I'm excited again to turn over to Chelsea. So, Chelsea, this is your moment. This is, we'd love to learn a little bit more about you and maybe your educational goals, and what kind of brought you here.
Sure. I was a student when I became a parent at 21, and I left school to work full time. And then I decided to go back to school when I was 25. I changed my major, and I spent almost 7 years at community college while working. And I just graduated last weekend with my bachelor's in psychology at Cal Poly. And fortunately, I won't have to stop going to school because I'm continuing in the fall at Cal Poly in the Higher Education Counseling and Student Affairs Master's program. And then, yeah, over the last year, I've worked as a student assistant for the Students with Dependence program at Cal Poly. And that's myself and my goals at this moment.
Thanks. Let's dive into that, those like 7+ years and ongoing, right? You're continuing your education. And can you tell us a little bit about maybe some resources that you received while you were enrolled and that made, college more attainable, affordable? I know that being a student parent and being in school can be expensive, and that can cause barriers. And so, what were some of the resources that you received, whether it's financial aid or others, that helped support you throughout your journey?
When I was at community college, I didn't receive a lot of financial aid because I just didn't know what was available, and I was working and I was a single mom, and I didn't really spend a lot of time advocating for myself and the support that I needed. And I also wasn't told about anything through like my academic advisors or any other departments on campus until I went to Cal Poly, and then I received the Cal Grant B and the student with dependent grant increase, and also some Cal Poly scholarships. And so I had my whole time at Cal Poly paid for, which allowed me to not work full time and graduate on time and also meet all my responsibilities, paying my bills and feeding my family. And my daughter has really expensive hobbies. So being able to worry about school and my child was a relief not having to worry about money.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Go ahead, Tina.
I want to add what Chelsea experienced was this sort of administrative burden, like one, not knowing, right, the resources that were available perhaps in the community college system, and then hopefully coming to Cal Poly and knowing like, okay, here's the financial aid package, which then relieved herself from filing all the different forms and necessary documents to get the aid that she needed so that she could successfully graduate on time, which we want all students to do. So I just want to like highlight that point, like what burden do we put on students and what burdens do we put on the system to make sure it's a seamless transition into and through our systems.
Yeah, that's such a great point, right? Like, how are we putting the onus on the institution to remove this barrier, right? And so things like, is there a centralized location on your website that identifies an advocate that student parents can go to have these questions? Because even as a first gen student myself, when I was a student, I didn't know what questions to ask. And I'm sure, that the experience is similar, right? Like, you just don't know what you don't know. And so it's really hard to put the responsibility on the student to say, well, it was always here. And so, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us, Chelsea. Um, Larissa, you were yourself a student parent, is that correct? Yeah. And so, if you can you share with us how you, in your perspective, how can colleges support student parents with college affordability?
Yeah, so I don't have the solutions. I wish I did, but I think we can be giving a lot more intentional thought to affordability for student parents. We need campuses to intentionally consider them in their strategic planning, right? From the very beginning, to think about them when they're, thinking about planning for facilities, right? Or student fee allocations or our campus budgets. And I've noticed that campus childcare, for instance, is supported pretty differently across the system, I think, which reflects differences in how this need is being prioritized. And so I'm hoping that with this new legislation, we can more purposefully use a student parent lens in the way that we're thinking about all forms of basic needs, right? And the way that we're thinking about cost of attendance so that we're truly serving students based on their lived reality. So even kind of doing like an inventory of basic needs and asking questions such as, do, the items in the cupboard, do they serve our student parent population, right? Do we have diapers that are available, or baby formula, or baby food, or wipes? Or does our emergency housing program also provide housing options, equitable housing options for student parents that go beyond maybe like a hotel voucher? So, thinking about, what do we have on campus right now, and to what extent are student parents included in the way that we're thinking about their needs? But it's not always about like building new things or adding, but just alerting students, to Tina's point, about resources that exist and removing those administrative burdens for them, so that we are the ones who are presenting the resources and information to them for the first time without them having to go out and seek out that information. So like cost of attendance adjustments forms, things like that. I also think about the importance of raising awareness of Title IX. So many students have lost semesters of credit because they weren't aware of their protections under Title IX. And so I see this very much in line with the affordability, because when they lose those hours or those units, that's not a good use of their tuition dollars. So we want them to stay in school and to graduate on time.
Larissa, thank you so much for that. You had briefly mentioned the cost of attendance adjustment. Can you give an example of what that looks like in your experience, and so that the audience kind of understands? I think we've been talking a little bit about COA, but I would love an example of what that looks like.
Yeah, so the cost of attendance is based on what the perceived needs are of a student without children. And as a student parent with 3 children, I had many more expenses. We needed a bigger house, so our rent, was higher. We needed a minivan to transport our children, so we had to pay for that. And the financial aid package that I was offered did not accurately reflect my true cost of attendance at a state university. And so I'm not too sure. It could have just me, like I was very much a researcher, just scouring the financial aid website, trying to look for more sources of aid. I did come across the cost of attendance adjustment form and was able to submit documentation showing my childcare expenses, my rent, my transportation. And so then that was adjusted, and I became eligible for more student loans, which is not always ideal, but it very, very much helped me to fill that financial gap that existed. My husband was also a full-time student and was working a retail job. And so we needed that extra support. It also enabled me to do research, to do things that students with more kind of discretionary time, were able to do. And that made me so much more competitive for the job market. So I always tell, my students now that it was student loans and food stamps, right, that got me to where I am. But it was a fairly easy process, very straightforward, as long as I had my documentation, and that's what all our student parents deserve.
Larissa, I appreciate that. Um, Tina, the next question's for you. Can you share a little bit about what the research has said about financial support on enrollment and graduation outcomes for student parents?
Great. A fabulous team out at Urban Institute, Garrett Hicks and Teresa Anderson, recently published a 2024 report. I'll drop the link in a little bit, studying the state of Virginia. And so they looked at comprehensive supports, they looked at grants, which is the financial piece, and childcare. And they found that the direct grant aid had a higher return on investment, about $1.74 for every dollar invested. It increased enrollment, it increased graduation rates. They were looking at 6-year graduation rates. So it was, and if you invest in financially on our student parents, meaning giving them additional aid, they graduated more, they were more persistent, and it was a return on investment. So the more models they looked at was the comprehensive supports and also childcare. All of those also have a high return on investment, with the highest return on investment when there's full campus support. So I think it just makes sense in terms of if we invest in these supports. This Gaines Act, I think, has been really pivotal, and the successful implementation of it will have returns. And that's why the data needs to be kept up so that we can follow cohorts at each of our 22 campuses in the CSU so that we see, hey, we've done this act. Let's track the graduation and persistence outcomes. Because at the end of the day, we want students to enter And we want them to graduate with jobs, which is aligned with the new chancellor's goals, right? It's workforce development. We want students to have thriving lives. And if it means investing financially, the return on investments when they're in the workforce, those tax dollars come back in California systems. So I think it's a win-win. It's not a deficit. It's you invest and the returns are more than what you put in. So I would look at, I'll make sure that report is dropped in the Q&A, in the chat.
Amazing. Thank you, Tina. Um, Chelsea, this question's for you. So for your peers, what are some of your what's like your top two like advice or thoughts to help them navigate college while they're enrolled?
I wrote this one down because it's important. To student parents out there, I would say to believe in yourself, you belong where you are, and you deserve to get the best experience at school. Something that helped me a lot on campus was finding those people that got me, and they weren't always other student parents, but maybe professors and other classmates. And I would recommend attending office hours, scouring your school's student parent websites, emailing with financial aid often, and finding a sweet student assistant job, because being on the inside has huge benefits. And also just sharing your story with the people around you.
Thank you. I really, really loved all of those things. So I can't believe our time is almost closing, but this question is posed to everyone here on the panel. So if you were granted one wish from a parenting student magical genie, what would your one wish be? We can start with Emily.
I would say my wish would be that students feel unconditionally connected to and supported by the campuses that they are attending.
I'll share. Um, in our state level budget, there's a reoccurring line item that every year students with dependents are funded so that every campus in the Cal State system, I work in the Cal State, so I'm going to speak to that. That's where I'm, has at least a minimum full-time staff member and a working budget reflective of the number of student parents that they have. That every campus has space, staffing, and budget. And that is basically becomes a new status quo. Higher ed wasn't built for us, so therefore we need to recreate and build those structures that exist so that 10 years from now, we'll just be like, it's always been here. We've always served student parents.
I would say that, all of higher ed transition from the goal of being student parent friendly to student parent serving, and that this is a mission that everybody feels a sense of responsibility to participate in.
My daughter has attended my classes, watched my lectures, and heard all my flashcards. And I wish there was some sort of like little mini bachelors that she could have earned, because I think that she's pretty far up there with all of us.
I love that. Thank you so much. So thank you so much for the panelists. We do have a number of Q&A questions that I'll go ahead and just pose to the group because we do have a few minutes. And feel free, anyone can chime in. Our first question, actually, let's see, is from Jessica. Do any of you know of any efforts to connect this work with academic affairs and address how faculty can support student parents through classroom policies, pedagogical approaches, etc.? And we do have a few faculty members on the call, so yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this is the area where there's so much opportunity to grow. I did create a module, a student parent awareness module for faculty on our campus. It's been a little tricky to kind of to spread awareness of that and monitor it. But if there was something that we could implement across the system, that could be a first stop for faculty to get advice on, like, examples for like syllabi statements and, equitable, absence policies, things like that. That would be very ideal. But yeah, that's definitely an area where I feel like we have a lot more opportunity to grow.
Yeah, I agree with Larissa. I think we typically work through our academic senate. And so I'm still new to the system as fairly junior faculty, but I think using that governance as a way to move. And I think once you have data, that makes it easier to bring situations up, and then documentation of patterns that are happening that we want to mitigate or resolve.
You. The next question comes from Monique. Any strategies for R1 campuses or campus climates and supporting visibility for student parents, more specifically graduate students? And how can we destigmatize parenting student like research?
I would say hour of the pen, writing op-eds, writing your story for your local campus paper is the entry point. I find that the public scholarship does get visibility. You do want to be solutions oriented, and so you want to, attend to the problem, try to address it, and then you come to this wall, and then you get stuck, and that's where you turn to be like, hey, I tried all the institutional processes, I did my due diligence, and yet you're still stuck, and that's a symptom of the system. And so you go to the op-ed, and then once that becomes public, we call those breadcrumbs, right? You're going to graduate, institutions will wait you out, but the people who come after you will recognize, like, hey, so and so has written about this. Why hasn't this problem been solved? They could build on your work. I think change is really, really hard in higher ed. It's enduring institutions, and it is resistance to change. And so the tactics of higher ed institution is wait students out. If they're troublemakers, quote unquote, right? The problems will graduate with them. But we know this is not a problem. And so that's where we need faculty and staff to really work together to listen to the voices of students, make sure they are at the table and heard so that we can co-create those solutions together. And it's a numbers game, right? You can't be the only one. You have to bring a team to highlight the problem to those in more powerful decision-making spaces.
And I feel like the destigmatization of the conversation with student parents is it's getting there. It's like the conversation around basic needs and how it started, right? And now it's a conversation around just the rights of our students, and the human rights. And so, yeah, I appreciate that. I think we are good. Thank you again to our panelists for sharing your stories and your expertise. We're really, really appreciative of you all. So I will go ahead and turn this back over to Laura. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you again to all of our panelists. We're really grateful to have you participate today and share all of your experiences and expertise, which certainly will be incredibly helpful in continuing our efforts to support student parents and their families. I wanted to note the Q&A. We've answered some of the questions that have come in over the last hour. Wanted to also just lift up the Alliance policy agenda and research agenda, which touches on our 5 core policy priorities, which include having family serving institutions. I know there are questions that have come in about, how can we make student parents more visible on campus and destigmatize parenting, um, especially at research institutions. Also questions about how we can connect this work with academic affairs and how faculty can support student parents through classroom policies and other pedagogical approaches. So there's a lot of rich information in both of those documents. And if we did not get around to answering your question, we will do our best to follow up, but just wanted to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you were able to learn a lot about CSU's Pregnant and Parenting Students Initiative, the Alliance, and all of our efforts to support student parents and colleges, including implementation for the Gains for Student Parents Act. We hope you will check out our website where you can find information, updates, and resources centralized in one place, including the Gains Act implementation fact sheet, toolkit, sample web page, roster, and other resources that we've shared today, and we will continue to create. And of course, as mentioned before, we will include all of this in a follow-up email. So please always feel free to reach out with any questions or to share ideas on how we can continue to collaborate in your ongoing efforts to support student parent success.